Good evening, everyone. I'm Casey Bortnick. In April of 2009, Greece Police Chief Rahn left this building after a Saturday morning meeting. It was the last time he would do so as chief. Rahn was suspended, convicted, and then sent to prison for what prosecutors called his role in a highly publicized cover-up. 5 years later, Rahn is speaking about these events publicly for the first time. Tonight, Rahn breaks his silence.
Life is so short. This was 1981. I look back and where'd time go? This was my first day as police chief back September 5th in 1989. 42 years gone.
No badges, no medals, not even a picture in uniform, just a scrapbook.
This is the Arthur Shawcross arrest.
And a vivid memory.
Once I see the article and I read, I know almost what day, what time it was, and the weather that day. It just instantly it comes back.
He is one of the most written about people in recent Monroe County history. And even 6 years after his retirement,
Ask Merritt Rahn. Ask Chad Rahn.
the name Rahn is still very much in the public consciousness.
But now that you mention it that way, there are quite a few articles and stories. Again, 99% are good, and I'm proud of that.
But it's that 1% in Merritt Rahn's estimation that he may be best known for.
My goal and my pledge to the residents of Greece is to take appropriate disciplinary action against anyone who has not followed the rules of our police department.
He was first accused by independent investigator Joe Lazinski of tampering with evidence and forcing those under his command to lie.
I had the authority to go into the police department unannounced.
Accusations that turned into criminal charges in a highly publicized cover-up in the Greece Police Department. It's a scandal that cost Rahn his dream job.
Even someone who was the chief of police, he is not above the law.
28 months into a 5-year sentence, Rahn was released from prison. He spent the last 3 years trying to put the past behind him.
To be honest with you, I feel I've more than paid my debt to society because I got sentenced and went to jail for something I didn't do.
It was during his incarceration back in 2010 that I first visited the former chief, offering him a chance to tell his side of the story. 5 years later, he decided it was time to break his silence.
I like the public to know some of the things that went on behind the scene, some of the things that were said that were untrue. But I figured this is a chance to do it, and I'll do it once.
According to Merritt Rahn, this whole ordeal can really be traced back to June 7th, 2008, 10:30 a.m.
Nick Joseph calls me and says, I think I've been involved in an accident.
Court records indicate Greece Police Sergeant Nick Joseph spent the previous night at a Rochester bar. After a long night out, Joseph was on his way home. He crashed into the back of a stalled car at 2:13 a.m.
He explained that he hit his head. I go, okay, where did it happen? He goes, I don't know. Then he called me back a half hour later and said he's going to the hospital. And that was the first I heard about it.
Joseph wasn't the only person injured that night. Turns out there was someone in that stalled car, a young pregnant mother named Alexis Sharp. A fact Rahn says he didn't learn until days later when he spoke to the DA's office.
I says, I won't use the language I used, but I says, no way, there's no injuries. The report, I got the report in front of me. It says 1 injury, Nick Joseph. I says, if that's the case, I don't want our police department to handle the case. I called the state police.
Prosecutors believe the calls from Nick Joseph to Chief Rahn's cell were proof that Rahn not only knew about the accident, but they speculated he advised Joseph not to go to the hospital until after the drugs were out of his system. There was one other accusation, one of tampering. It seemed to resonate with the public.
They took my shredding basket, nothing was found, and it never happened.
While alluded to in the Lazinski report and referenced during Rahn's criminal trial, nothing incriminating from Rahn's shredder was ever specifically presented as evidence. Coming up, Joseph wasn't the only officer whose behavior put Rahn under a microscope. This, as no apologies, Merritt Rahn breaks his silence, continues. Rahn's history with Gary Pignato dates back to the Rochester Police Department. And Rahn says in 2002, when he learned Pignato had applied for a job here in the town of Greece, he had a clear message for town supervisor John Auberger.
I was, ironically, Gary Pignato's sergeant in the city. I unequivocally told Auberger, don't hire him.
Pignato, as a member of the Greece Police Department, was accused of and later convicted of coercing a woman into sex by threatening to report her for violating her parole. A second accuser claimed Pignato threatened to report her to Child Protective Services for smoking marijuana unless she agreed to have sex with him. It was Pignato's record before he got hired in Greece that was the focus of Rahn's criminal trial. Court documents show Pignato was fired from the Rochester Police Department in the late 1990s after he hired a prostitute to engage in sex acts at a fellow officer's birthday party. Despite that and other complaints, Pignato received a glowing recommendation from several former employers, including former RPD Chief Bob Duffy. Greece Police Sergeant Robert Trowbridge, who conducted Pignato's background check, never spoke to Duffy. Trowbridge testified against Rahn and said he was ordered by the chief to lie. Any hard feelings toward Robert Trowbridge?
Absolutely. Absolutely. He sold his soul. He sold his soul.
How did Gary Pignato ultimately get hired? If you didn't want him there, and you made it clear you didn't want him there.
Again, it's hard to explain to the public and your viewers. The supervisor at the time did all the hiring. All the hiring.
Oddly enough, one person who did appear to have input in the hiring of Gary Pignato was John Parinello, Rahn's attorney. Parinello had previously represented Pignato, and his former client asked if he could help him get a job in Greece.
I called John Auberger. We discussed it.
Parinello says Auberger eventually asked to meet Pignato, a meeting that took place in Parinello's office.
Auberger sat in a chair across from me. Gary sat next to him, and Auberger turned to Gary and said, I am going to hire you because John Parinello asked me to.
During Rahn's criminal trial, Parinello questioned Supervisor Auberger under oath about that meeting. Auberger acknowledged it did happen, but said he couldn't recall if Pignato was there. The meeting was never mentioned in the Lazinski reports. Still, as the trial played out, Rahn and his supporters were hopeful for an acquittal. That, of course, didn't happen.
Criminal justice system stinks. Right. That's all I've got to say.
Rahn was initially denied parole, but was released a year later, based mostly on good behavior. And in December of 2012, he was finally able to go home. And it seemed that's how this whole ordeal would end. Or so we thought. Coming up after the break, a civil lawsuit sheds new light on Rahn's case. In September of 2009, the two women who accused Gary Pignato of trying to coerce them into sex filed a civil lawsuit against Pignato, former Chief Merritt Rahn, the Greece Police Department, and the town of Greece. Rochester-based attorney Norm Palmieri, who was representing the two women, was about to uncover details not revealed in Rahn's criminal trial.
Gary Pignato was the prime mover, but the hiring of Gary Pignato, in our opinion, went beyond Rahn, beyond the board.
When we say beyond, are we talking about John Auberger?
You can draw that conclusion based on your review of the depositions.
Thousands of pages seem to not only provide a window into who ran the Greece Police Department, but the independent review that led to Rahn's suspension and ultimately his prosecution.
At the deposition, Joe Lazinski told me that the purpose of his investigation was the police department. There were places, and you've read the deposition, I know, where it seemed like Joe Lazinski had the ability to go beyond the police department, but didn't.
One such opportunity, Palmieri says, was that meeting in John Parinello's office between Parinello, Auberger, and Pignato. Parinello says that's when Auberger hired Pignato. In the deposition, Lazinski said he heard about the meeting, but Auberger told him it didn't happen. He said he didn't follow up with Parinello because the two had a, quote, adversarial relationship.
Certainly there were some leads. That as a ace investigator, I was curious as to why they weren't followed up.
Suspicions a key witness in Rahn's criminal trial may have been able to confirm. Robert Trowbridge told Palmieri that during a visit to Pignato's home as part of that background check, he noticed something odd on Pignato's refrigerator. Quote, what got my attention was a letter-sized paper with the town of Greece insignia on it. And I looked, and it had a starting date for his employment signed by our supervisor, John Auberger. Following a meeting in Auberger's office, Trowbridge told Palmieri the pressure he was feeling to falsify the background check went beyond Chief Rahn. Quote, "It had to be done the exact way the supervisor wanted it. It had to be positive, or there's no doubt about it, I would have been terminated." Palmieri also deposed Dr. Jay Supnick, who conducted Pignato's psychological evaluation for the Greece PD. Supnick told Palmieri he had multiple conversations with Lizinski and his investigation team. Notes turned over to the DA's office suggested Rahn pressured Supnick to give Pignato a passing grade. Supnick was angry when this account showed up in media reports. Quote, "He asked me several times, did Merritt Rahn ever ask you to change your report? Did he ever intimidate you? Did he ever influence you? I told him, no, that never happened." When asked about interactions with one of Lizinski's investigators, Maynard Kosnett, Supnick summed it up this way. Quote, "Rahn never told me to change the grade. Kosnett wove a story together with facts that fit Kosnett's view, in my mind. That's my opinion."
Page 56 from the Lizinski deposition. He's being deposed here by Norm Palmieri. Palmieri says, at the completion of your investigation, did you assign any responsibility to John Auberger for the hiring of Gary Pignato? Lizinski says no. Palmieri says, why not? Lizinski says, it wasn't my mission. Palmieri asks, it wasn't your mission? Lizinski says, it wasn't my mission and responsibility. It was basically my marching orders to investigate the police department and all misconduct by police officers, not the administration. Palmieri asks, and those marching orders came from John Auberger. Lizinski answers, that's correct. Now, what did you take that it wasn't my mission to mean?
My opinion, Lizinski's a buffoon. He had one job, and that was to find Auberger innocent of everything and make me the bad guy.
Lizinski said he was paid $240,000 in base salary for his 2 years of work on the job. All of his work was turned over to the Monroe County DA's office as part of the criminal case against Rahn. But according to Sergeant Trowbridge, Lizinski's involvement didn't stop there. As part of the agreement to avoid felony charges, Trowbridge and his attorney met with Assistant DA Sandra Dorley. Trowbridge says Lizinski was not only present at the meeting, he ran it. Quote, Sandra Dorley sat at the head of the table. She asked a couple of questions, but the proffer was run by Lizinski. Quote, my attorney was concerned that he, Lizinski, would run directly back to Auberger and tell him everything that was said in the proffer. Shortly after that meeting, Trowbridge says he received a message from his union vice president, which he believes was a message from the town administration. Quote, if I brought up John Auberger from here on out, I would be terminated, and my benefits would be curtailed.
Do you feel any responsibility for his actions at all?
No, I would feel responsibility for being able to create the investigation and to move the department forward.
For his part, John Auberger's story has remained the same since I asked him that question back in 2010. His deposition added little to clarify his alleged involvement in these events.
Another attorney in this case who was involved described Mr. Auberger as having quote-unquote selective amnesia, and I think you probably saw that quote.
I did.
Do you think that was a fair statement by the other attorney?
Might be.
I mean, who can tell you Hank Aaron's batting average in his first year in the game? I mean, his memory is so good with regard to that. His selective amnesia, my opinion is, he didn't tell the truth.
Who do you think hired Gary Pignato?
It wasn't Merritt Rahn.
I find it, as life goes on, I forget the bad things.
No matter what people think, Ron says he's not ashamed to look back.
I just enjoy life. I'm having a good time, and lucky I have my family and friends.
With 4 decades of law enforcement in the books, he makes no apologies.
Those who are going to believe are going to believe. Those who are not. Quite honestly, my life goes on and I don't care.
Monroe County District Attorney Sandra Dorley declined to comment on our story. We reached out to former town supervisor John Auberger. He did not return our calls. His lawyer cautioned the depositions in the Pignato civil trial should be read with skepticism because, quote, various witnesses have various interests in the outcome of the case. In case you're wondering, that civil lawsuit was settled out of court. Sources tell us the town of Greece paid out $900,000. John Parinello won a judgment against Merritt Rahn for money owed for his criminal trial. We were unable to reach Robert Trowbridge or Joe Lizinski by airtime. As for Rahn, officially, he retired from the Greece Police Department September 2nd of 2009. He continues to collect a pension. For more of my story with Merritt Rahn, including the full interview, just head to our website, twcnews.com. I'm Casey Bortnick. Thanks for watching.